This is 98.3 The Rock, WKSG Garrison, WEEC HD2 Springfield. This is across the tri state public affairs programming brought to you courtesy of The Rock. I'm Lisa Jordan, your host on the broadcast today. Special guest, author Teresa Schweinsberg, Breaking the Sound Barrier. This is her new book. Teresa, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me, Lisa. I
We're glad
appreciate it.
We're glad you could be along with us today. You are no stranger to the tri state area. You are from this area, and we are so grateful that you could spend some time with us and talk about the new book, Breaking the Sound Barrier. Teresa, where are you from, and what have you been doing?
I'm from Wheelersburg, Ohio, and I lived there the majority of my life. And then my husband and son are both in music, as you well know, and so we moved to Nashville almost 20 years ago. But prior to that, I always lived in Wheelersburg.
And this is your second effort at writing, and I love the book. It's a true
Thank you.
story. And tell us a little bit about the book. What is the book about? Breaking the Sound Barrier.
Well, it's actually a true inspirational story, and it's about that area. It's about Green High School in Franklin Furnace, Ohio, right beside Wheelersburg, where I grew up. I taught at Green schools for 27 years before coming to Tennessee, and I taught most of my career was deaf and hard of hearing children. And so one of my deaf students who had never played football ever, he didn't play Pee Wee, he didn't play middle school, and he was a sophomore in high school and decided that he loved football. And after two-a-days in August practice and two games already done for that season, he decided to ask the coach if he could play football. And he was profoundly deaf, totally sign language dependent. And as his teacher, and not knowing the coach very well, just he wasn't a teacher at the school. He actually worked in insurance, but he was a very gifted athlete in high school and college, and coached different sports at the school. And he was standing in high school, and Jeremy motioned for me to come and be his voice. And I went into the hallway with him, not knowing what in the world he needed me for, because he was very shy, rarely spoke to hearing people. And he told the coach he wanted to play football. And I'm thinking, being a coach's daughter and having a brother who played every sport and was a quarterback in high school, that the coach would probably say, well, son, we're in the middle of the season. You missed all the practices all year. Why don't you just try out next year? But that is not what Coach Dan McDavid said. He actually said, let me make some phone calls and meet me at the football field at 4 o'clock after school. And so again, oh, me of little faith. I was thinking, well, he's just putting off, he's delaying his response to Jeremy because he doesn't want to hurt his feelings. But again, excuse me, he surprised me by having a physical card in his hand, and asked Jeremy if he would go to the doctor and get a physical so he could play, and ask me if I would be available to interpret for football. And I said yes. And that decision not only changed Jeremy's life and my life, but it changed the lives of the students in the school and the whole community. And so the book details all of that. It has some humorous stories in it about um, fails of
Yeah.
both the coach and I, trying to work out this thing so that Jeremy could play um, every Friday night. And it was just a very special time in my life. The best 2 years of my teaching career, actually.
Well, you said that it changed lives. I guess one of the first changes that I noticed in the book was that the coach, and his name is
Dan McDavid.
Dan McDavid, wanted to communicate with Jeremy. And how did he do that? This is pretty amazing to me that this coach went above and beyond to communicate with Jeremy to play the game?
Yes, for sure. That just does not happen. Coach Dan decided that he wanted to learn sign language because he told me that, I was a woman, of course, that he wasn't worried about that. But, I had an antagonist on the team that didn't think a woman belonged on the football field. And so for the coach to try to communicate to Jeremy through me was a little awkward. He was a softie, really, but we didn't know that. He was a tough coach, and he wanted to be able to bond with Jeremy directly and not have to go through me for everything. And so he began his journey to learn sign language to communicate with Jeremy. And can I share a
Yeah,
funny
the first
story that's in the book?
that's exactly what I want you to share, is that
Okay.
in the book you talk about his first communication with Jeremy using sign language.
Yes. So he would get off his insurance job, and in between that and the football practice every evening, the field was right behind my room in the school. He would come to my classroom and he would work with me on sign language. And so the very first night, he said, I need to be able to tell him something and command it so that he knows I mean business and that it's coming from me, not from you. And I said, "Okay, what do you wanna learn?" And he said, "Well, maybe I could start with just 2 words." And those 2 words were work, let me get my hands up here, work hard. And so we worked on those 2 words, work hard, and we worked on facial expression. I said, if you're gonna say something and mean it, you have to, say it with, a scowl or a, commanding, facial expression. You can't be smiley and, say work
Yeah.
hard. You've gotta have your face match your sign. And so we worked on that for about an hour, and we got to the field and the boys were coming out of the locker room, and he said, "How do I get his attention?" And I said, "Well, you just have to, wave him down and then, motion for him to come over." And so the coach was excited. He had practiced, he had worked so hard on these 2 words. And so Jeremy came up and they had just fitted him for his helmet, but it was a little too loose. And so he had to tilt his head back to be able to see between the face mask and the helmet. And the coach signed what he thought was work hard, and he signed this, which is not this. And Jeremy's face immediately scrunched in a question mark. And so he looked at me, and I turned my head away because, here's this coach that has just given his heart to learn these 2 words, and he totally bombed it. And, Jeremy and I both knew it, and I didn't wanna laugh in his face, and so I turned my head, and the coach immediately saw and said, "Okay, what did I do wrong?" And I said, "Well, you just told him to make your coffee." And so, some tough guys would have, been embarrassed and never probably wanted to try again. But Coach McDavid and his personality, he just said, "Okay, show me again. I want to get this right." And from that moment on, he could laugh at himself. And there were more blunders, a lot more blunders that are humorous in the book. But he always was able to laugh at himself and, excuse me, continue. He never took it personally like, I give up, I can't do
Yeah.
this. And before long, the boys saw that he was doing something that wasn't comfortable for him. And so they began to learn sign language to help Jeremy. Jeremy also proved his toughness on the field, and that impressed the boys. Even my antagonist that didn't want me on there started to come around because he saw, excuse me, Jeremy wasn't going to depend on the boys. He was going to be just as tough as they were. And so all of that combined, and then students who had never included my deaf students in anything began to learn sign language. And um, just the impact on the school, and more of my deaf students began to get involved in other sports, which they had never tried before. They were scared. The hearing students would talk to them in the hall. That had never happened. My students were isolated in a room. When all the other kids were changing classes and socializing, my students just stood at the door longingly watching them, knowing that they couldn't be a part of it. And suddenly, the entire halls were filled with hands flying instead of just voices. And it was just an amazing thing to watch over those 2 years and to see how it changed the school, but also, if you read till the end, you find out that it changed the entire community and other communities surrounding it because this coach continued to do amazing things for others. And it's just really, I often joke with his family that unfortunately, Coach McDavid passed away with cancer in 2020. And that's when I began writing the book because I saw the love that his players were posting on his Facebook page. And I posted a little bit of this story, and immediately everyone said, "You've got to write a book." Well, I told his family if he were still here, he would have been very upset with me for writing the book because so many great things that he did for others was done in secret. And he didn't want me to tell anyone. I knew a lot. I knew when brand new cleats showed up in a boy's locker that didn't have the money and was living in poverty. I knew when they showed up that I knew who did it, and no one else did. He didn't ever tell things like that. And so I got to say a lot in the book that others would not have known, had he still been here telling me, "Don't say anything." So, it was my pleasure to write the book and let people know how really great he was.
He had a tremendous heart for his students and for
He
his
sure did.
players and for the community.
He did.
You said in the book, I thought it was quite interesting. During the season, you made the coach aware that he needed to continue his communication with Jeremy where he could see him and understand his instruction, and the community at large, the people in the stands needed to communicate when Jeremy made a great play in one of the, games. Tell us a little bit about that and how they communicated, their, acceptance of him on the team.
Well, to a deaf person, applause is noise and they can't hear it. And so they're not aware when someone is giving them some praise or, telling them that they did a great job. And so there's what's called deaf applause. And so instead of clapping with no, sound to them, you use your hands like this and just wave them, and that gets deaf people's attention. So if you ever go to an all deaf school and they have a performance, like a dance performance or something that they do, like visiting Gallaudet University, the all deaf college in Washington, D.C., when everyone's done, it's kind of funny if there are deaf people or hearing people there because they don't know what to do. No one applauds, clapping, they do this, and so the whole room is quiet, but the deaf students immediately know
They
that they're
know.
applauding for them, and so the community learned that and used it in the stands, and it
The entire
even
community.
yes, it even, f flo flew bleh, flowed over to, other teams because they knew Jeremy was on the team by all the publicity that he and the coach had had, and so even sometimes we'd see in the other stands, even though they were the opposing team, we would see some of them doing this when we did it.
It's wonderful, wonderful. I know that when Jeremy was accepted with his play, the entire arena erupted with the praise and applause, and he knew it was communicated to him, so I think that's really cool. Another cool thing I thought about the book was about the coach and how he was awarded the most caring coach, from USA Today. How did that
Yes.
happen?
Well, first of all, it wasn't the most winning coach because
Oh,
we did
winning
not
most
win.
caring. Yeah,
We
winning
didn't
most caring.
win hardly any games, and that's what, he was a very competitive person, and he had won a state championship there 2 years before, and in those 2 years that Jeremy played, the focus it was a little ragtag team, very small school, and like I said, most of the boys lived in poverty, there was a lot, and, so he didn't have the greatest team, but he loved and cared for those boys, and so when this award was pointed out to me by USA Today nationally, they were looking for the most caring coach in the United States. And so I nominated him, and of course, he won. And so this coach that never wanted anybody to know what he did, I had to grin myself when he came in with the letter where he had won the award. And And, he couldn't hold it in, but he was grinning too, and he said, "Do you know anything about this letter? Do you know anything about this?" And I said, "Maybe." And, he got to go to Washington, DC. He was on the front, cover of USA Today, their little, insert in the national paper, and he won $500 for being the most caring coach, and guess what he did with the $500?
Yeah. He donated it to the program.
He did. He donated it to the deaf kids who were going on a trip to Washington, DC to visit Gallaudet University.
Well,
So
Teresa,
he
thank you so much for joining us today on Across the Tri-State and telling us about Breaking the Sound Barrier book. If somebody wanted more information about this story and all the stories going along with Little Franklin Furnace, Ohio, Jeremy and Coach McDavid, where could they go?
well, the book is available on Amazon, and you can just look up Breaking the Sound Barrier by Teresa Schweinsberg and, find it there.
Thank you, Teresa, for your time. We appreciate it so much, and we're looking forward to the next book.
Oh, well, thank you. I
Thanks,
appreciate
Teresa.
it.
God bless you until we meet again.